Have you ever wondered if ancient texts could hold secrets about humanity's purpose, the structure of time, and the hidden connections in biblical stories? What if the answers to some of life's greatest mysteries were buried in a book that's been largely forgotten? Today, we're uncovering the treasures within the Book of Jubilee, a fascinating text often referred to as the Little Genesis. Unlike the canonical books of the Bible, the Book of Jubilee retells many of the same early stories. It adds layers of intricate detail and profound meaning. More than a simple narrative, it reimagines these accounts with breathtaking scope, divine wisdom, and a surprising focus on the rhythm of sacred time. Why should this matter to us? Because the Book of Jubilee offers something unique. It reframes the familiar stories of creation, the flood, Abraham, and Joseph, providing fresh insights that challenge and deepen our understanding. This text introduces the concept of jubilees, 50-year cycles that divide human history into chapters, revealing how God's plan unfolds across time. Within its pages are profound lessons about justice, mercy, and the human struggle for redemption. But the Book of Jubilee isn't merely an ancient chronicle. It carries bold claims about humanity's connection to divine purpose. It discusses the Watchers, fallen angels whose rebellion led to the flood, and Abraham's remarkable trials of faith, which reveal more than just his readiness to sacrifice Isaac. It also delves into Joseph's journey, showing how betrayal and forgiveness intertwine to demonstrate God's providence. This book has puzzled scholars for centuries. Though it didn't make it into the canon of most Jewish or Christian traditions, it was highly influential during the Second Temple period and remains a vital part of Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity. Scholars believe it was written around the 2nd century BCE and was cherished by early Jewish communities. Its exclusion from most modern Bibles doesn't diminish its significance. It's a window into ancient interpretations of God's covenant with humanity. So what can we learn from this overlooked text? More than history or prophecy, it offers soul-stirring lessons for modern life, on forgiveness, divine timing, and the rhythms of rest and renewal. By the end of this exploration, you'll see why the Book of Jubilee isn't just an ancient artifact. It's a guide for every generation. Are you ready to uncover what's hidden in the Book of Jubilee? Let's begin. The story begins before time itself, when there was nothing but silence and the infinite presence of God. Out of that silence, a voice spoke, "Let there be light." In an instant, the universe began to bloom, light spilling across the void, separating day from night, chaos from order. We know this story from Genesis, but the Book of Jubilee gives it a fresh lens, portraying creation not just as an event, but as the beginning of a sacred rhythm. In this retelling, time is more than a sequence of moments. It's a divine gift, broken into cycles called jubilees, each spanning 50 years. Imagine history as a great cosmic clock, with every jubilee representing a turning of its gears, each movement precise and purposeful. In this divine design, every day, every week, and every year plays a role in God's grand narrative. Adam and Eve's life in the Garden of Eden reflects this rhythm. In the Book of Jubilee, they are more than mere caretakers of a paradise. They are stewards of sacred time. Their work goes beyond tending to plants and animals. It's about living in harmony with the divine rhythm God established. Every 7th day, they pause to rest and rejoice in the order God created. Every cycle, they celebrate their connection to the Creator. But as we know, this harmony doesn't last. The serpent's temptation isn't just a moment of rebellion, it's a disruption of this sacred rhythm. When Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit, they step out of sync with God's timing. Imagine the serenity of Eden shattered, replaced by guilt, labor, and loss. Humanity is cast out, but God's rhythm continues. Even in exile, he begins a plan of restoration, weaving a melody of redemption that echoes through every jubilee to come. Centuries later, this same rhythm shapes the story of Noah's flood. In the Book of Jubilee, the flood is not merely a tale of destruction, it's a divine reset. Humanity's wickedness had thrown creation into chaos, and the flood served to cleanse and restore the balance. Picture Noah, weary but faithful, stepping off the ark onto a renewed earth. The rainbow in the sky isn't just a promise, it's a sign that the divine clock has been reset, marking the start of a new jubilee. This rhythm is also deeply tied to Abraham's story. Imagine him standing under a starlit sky, hearing God's promise that his descendants will outnumber the stars. In the Book of Jubilee, this promise is woven into the cycles of time, with each jubilee serving as a reminder of God's faithfulness. Abraham's faith isn't just in God's power, it's in his perfect timing, even when the fulfillment of promises seems delayed. One of the most striking features of the Book of Jubilee is its vision of the Jubilee year. Every 50 years, debts are forgiven, land is restored to its original owners, and communities are reunited. It's a glimpse of what the world looks like when God's order is fully realized, a taste of heaven on earth. And here the Book of Jubilee introduces Enoch, the seventh generation from Adam. Enoch's story, which we'll explore in greater detail later, is intricately tied to this sacred rhythm. Described as a man who walked with God, Enoch's life becomes a model of living in harmony with divine time. His writings, as portrayed in the Book of Jubilee, preserve the sacred cycles and offer humanity a guide for aligning with God's plan. Now think about our modern world, where time often feels like a burden rather than a blessing. We race through days, chasing deadlines and goals, rarely pausing to reflect or rest. Imagine if we embraced the Jubilee rhythm. If we saw time not as a commodity to be spent, but as a divine gift to be cherished. In the Book of Jubilee, the Sabbath is more than a day off. It's a declaration of trust in God's provision. It's a call to pause, to realign, and to remember that time itself belongs to the Creator. Like Adam and Eve in Eden, we're invited to steward this gift, living in harmony with God's rhythm. This is the beauty of the Book of Jubilee. It's not just about rules or cycles. It's a story of creation, disruption, and restoration. It's a reminder that no matter how far we stray, the rhythm of God's time is always calling us back, offering us a chance to begin anew. Imagine a time when the earth was young, fields stretching wide under endless skies, humanity's footsteps just beginning to echo across creation. The world was full of promise, but beneath its surface, shadows stirred, and a cosmic rebellion began to unfold. According to the Book of Jubilee, the years leading up to Noah's flood weren't merely marked by human wickedness. They were shaped by events that blurred the boundaries between heaven and earth. At the heart of this story are the Watchers, angels sent by God to guide humanity. Their role was to nurture, protect, and teach, but their fascination with humanity grew into something far more dangerous. Overcome by desire, they descended from their heavenly posts and took human women as wives. From these forbidden unions came the Nephilim, a race of giants described as symbols of unchecked power and corruption. Imagine their towering forms striding across the earth, their presence a terrifying blend of the divine and the profane. These giants ruled through fear and strength, spreading violence and chaos. Humanity, already faltering, spiraled further into moral decay. But the Nephilim weren't the only legacy of the Watchers. These fallen angels shared forbidden knowledge, secrets of weaponry, manipulation of natural elements, and occult practices. What might have seemed like gifts of progress turned into tools of destruction. Fields were neglected as wars erupted, crops withered, and humanity became ensnared in greed, violence, and despair. The earth itself seemed to groan under the weight of this corruption. Rivers ran red with blood, animals fled from destruction, and the once harmonious rhythm of creation was drowned in chaos. In the Book of Jubilee, this isn't just a story of judgment, it's a poignant tale of sorrow. God looks upon the devastation, his heart grieving over the broken state of his creation. The decision to bring the flood isn't impulsive wrath, it's a painful act of restoration, a reset to restore the harmony that had been lost. Yet even in judgment there is mercy. God's gaze falls upon Noah, described as righteous in his generation. Picture Noah, a quiet, steadfast man, building a massive ark in obedience to God's command. The laughter and ridicule of his neighbors echo around him, but Noah presses on, his faith unwavering. He becomes a beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness. The floodwaters come suddenly, as if creation itself could bear humanity's sins no longer. Thunder crashes, rain falls in torrents, and the ground disappears beneath rising tides. Inside the ark, Noah and his family huddle together with the animals, carrying the seeds of a new beginning. For 40 days and nights, the ark drifts on a boundless sea. Imagine Noah standing on the deck, staring into the endless horizon, trusting in God's promise even as the world around him seems irreparably broken. When the rain stops and the waters recede, the world is transformed. Noah steps onto dry land, the silence of this cleansed earth almost deafening. His first act is to build an altar, offering a sacrifice to God, a symbol of gratitude and a plea for guidance in this new chapter of creation. In response, God places a rainbow in the sky, a covenant of hope and a sign that the cycles of time, marked by jubilees, will continue. Humanity has been given a second chance. But what of the Watchers, the fallen angels who had played such a catastrophic role? The Book of Jubilee describes their judgment. They are bound in chains and cast into darkness, their rebellion serving as a cautionary tale. The Nephilim, too, fade into the shadowy memory of history, a haunting reminder of what happens when power is wielded without wisdom. Here, Enoch's role becomes significant. While his story is explored more deeply in later sections, the Book of Jubilee highlights Enoch as the one who foresaw the consequences of the Watcher's actions. Enoch's writings and teachings served as a warning, revealing the dangers of straying from God's ordained order. His life is a testament to living in alignment with divine purpose, even in the face of widespread corruption. For us today, the story of the flood carries profound lessons. Like the Watchers, we live in a world surrounded by knowledge and power that can be used for good or ill. The flood is a reminder that even the greatest advancements can lead to ruin when they're disconnected from God's guidance. And Noah's steadfast faith reminds us that righteousness isn't about perfection. It's about trust and obedience, even when the world mocks us for it. The flood was not the end, but a new beginning. It's a call to align our lives with God's rhythm, to trust in His restoration, and to remember that even in judgment, His mercy remains steadfast. The Ark, the rainbow, and the sacred cycles of jubilees are not just ancient symbols. They're reminders that no matter how chaotic the world becomes, God's plan is always unfolding. The night is still, the vast desert sky a canvas of stars. Beneath this celestial display stands Abraham, wrapped in his weathered cloak, his eyes lifted toward the heavens. The voice of God breaks the silence. Look up at the stars. Count them if you can, so shall your descendants be. This promise, recorded in the Book of Jubilee, is monumental. To Abraham, an old man without children, it is both wondrous and incomprehensible. Yet this moment under the stars is more than just a promise of offspring. It is the foundation of a covenant that will ripple through history, shaping the destiny of nations. Abraham's journey begins years earlier in Haran, where he lives a quiet, stable life among his family. The days are filled with tending flocks and maintaining his household. But one day, everything changes. God's voice calls him to leave everything he knows. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. Imagine the bewilderment Abraham must have felt. To abandon the familiar, the land of his ancestors, the safety of his family, for an unknown destination seems unfathomable. Yet the promise is clear. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. In the Book of Jubilee, Abraham's departure is more than a physical relocation, it's a spiritual act of trust. Picture him gathering his belongings, leading his flocks and household into the wilderness. Each step is a step away from the comfort of the past and closer to God's unfolding plan. The journey, however, is not without trials. Abraham faces famine, conflict with neighboring tribes, and doubts about the fulfillment of God's promises. These struggles refine his faith, transforming him into the father of a great nation. His story is one of perseverance, a testament to the power of unwavering trust in God's timing. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching moment comes when God asks Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, the long-awaited son of the promise. Imagine the anguish in Abraham's heart as he hears this command. Isaac isn't just his beloved child. He represents the fulfillment of God's covenant, the future of his lineage. Yet Abraham obeys. The journey to Mount Moriah is a solemn one. Picture Abraham walking in silence, each step heavy with the weight of what lies ahead. Isaac walks beside him, carrying the wood for the altar, his innocent questions cutting through the silence. "Father," Isaac asks, "the fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" Abraham's voice trembles as he replies, "God himself will provide the lamb." At the summit, the tension reaches its peak. Abraham binds Isaac and places him on the altar. The knife is raised, its blade glinting in the sunlight. But just as he prepares to strike, a voice calls out, "Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy." Relief washes over him as he sees a ram caught in a thicket nearby. Isaac is spared, and the altar becomes a place of divine provision. In the Book of Jubilee, this moment is a profound revelation of God's purpose. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac is not merely a test of obedience. It's a demonstration of his absolute trust in God's plan, even when it defies human understanding. This act foreshadows the sacrificial love that will later define God's relationship with humanity. The covenant God establishes with Abraham is extraordinary. It's not just a promise to one man, it's a blueprint for the future. God pledges to make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars and to bless all nations through him. This covenant is deeply tied to the cycles of time outlined in the Book of Jubilee. Each Jubilee becomes a marker of God's faithfulness, a reminder that his promises endure across generations. This covenant is also marked by tangible signs. Circumcision, introduced in the Book of Jubilee, becomes a physical symbol of the agreement, linking Abraham's descendants to God's rhythm of sacred time. It ties the covenant to the eternal cycles of jubilees and Sabbaths, grounding divine promises in the rhythm of creation. Abraham's story, like the rhythms of jubilees, echoes into the present. His journey challenges us to examine our own lives. Are we willing to step into the unknown, trusting in promises that seem distant or impossible? Do we have the faith to release what we hold dear, trusting that God's plans surpass our understanding? Finally, Abraham's covenant reminds us of God's unwavering faithfulness. Just as the stars continue to shine above us, so too do his promises endure. Like Abraham, we are invited into this covenant, called to live lives marked by trust, obedience, and faith. As the desert night deepens, Abraham lowers his gaze from the stars. His heart is filled with quiet assurance, knowing he is part of a divine narrative that spans generations. His story, preserved in the Book of Jubilee, continues to inspire, challenging us to align our lives with God's rhythm and purpose. The sun rises over the hills of Canaan, casting its golden light on a moment that will shape the destiny of a nation. Jacob, now an old man, gathers his 12 sons around him. His voice, trembling but resolute, carries words that are more than paternal blessings. They are declarations of destiny. Jacob's story, as retold in the Book of Jubilee, is one of profound transformation. Born grasping the heel of his twin brother Esau, Jacob's name reflects his early nature, one who supplants. The rivalry between the brothers, rooted in their birth, grows into a lifelong struggle that echoes the tension between divine promises and human ambition. The pivotal moment in Jacob's early life comes when he deceives his father Isaac to steal Esau's blessing. Imagine the scene. Jacob, disguised in his brother's clothes, approaches his blind father. His heart races as he places the food before Isaac, his hands trembling beneath the rough goatskins meant to mimic Esau's hairy arms. The voice is Jacob's, Isaac says hesitantly, but the hands are Esau's. Yet he bestows the blessing, unknowingly setting Jacob on a path toward divine destiny. This act of deception forces Jacob to flee for his life. Picture him alone in the wilderness, guilt and fear pressing down on him. As night falls, he collapses onto the ground, a stone for his pillow. In his sleep, a vision unfolds, a ladder stretching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending upon it. At the top stands God, who speaks, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying." This dream changes everything. Jacob awakens with a new awareness of his role in God's plan. He names the place Bethel, meaning house of God, and begins to understand that his journey is part of a greater narrative, one tied to the sacred cycles of jubilees. Years later, Jacob finds himself in the household of his uncle Laban. Here, the deceiver becomes the deceived. Imagine Jacob, his eyes lighting up at the sight of Rachel, agreeing to work 7 years to marry her. But when the wedding night arrives, he discovers too late that he has been tricked into marrying Leah, Rachel's older sister. The irony is sharp, but Jacob's perseverance prevails. He works another 7 years for Rachel, and through these years of service, Jacob is transformed. His trials teach him patience, resilience, and trust in God's timing. Through Jacob's relationships with Leah, Rachel, and their maidservants, the 12 sons who will form the tribes of Israel are born. Each son carries a unique personality and destiny, reflecting the diversity of the future nation. Reuben, the eldest, forfeits his birthright through reckless actions. Judah rises as a leader, with his lineage destined to produce kings. Joseph, the favored son, endures betrayal and exile before emerging as a symbol of resilience and divine providence. In the Book of Jubilee, these sons are more than individuals. They represent the foundation of God's covenant with Israel. Each tribe's role is tied to a divine purpose, from leadership and priesthood to defense and governance. Their lives, marked by both triumphs and failures, illustrate the complexity of human nature within the framework of God's plan. In his final days, Jacob calls his sons to his side. Picture the frail patriarch, his voice weighted with years of wisdom, speaking words that will shape the identity of a nation. To each son, he gives a blessing, or a warning, that reflects their character and future. To Judah, Jacob says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet." These words foretell the rise of kings like David, and ultimately point to the Messiah, who will come from Judah's line. To Joseph, Jacob offers a double portion, blessing his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as his own. "You are a fruitful vine," he declares, acknowledging Joseph's faithfulness and resilience in the face of great trials. In the Book of Jubilee, Jacob's blessings are not merely predictions, they are declarations of divine destiny. The tribes' roles in Israel's history, from spiritual leadership to military might, are rooted in these prophetic words. Together they form a nation called to live in covenant with God, bound by the rhythms of sacred time and the cycles of jubilees. Jacob's story offers profound lessons for us today. His journey from a deceiver to a patriarch reminds us that God's grace has the power to transform even the most flawed among us. No matter how we begin, God can shape us into vessels of His purpose. The blessings of the 12 tribes also teach us about unity in diversity. Each tribe had a unique role, but together they formed a single nation. In the same way, we are called to embrace our individual gifts while working toward a greater collective purpose. Finally, Jacob's life invites us to trust in God's timing. Just as Jacob waited years for his blessings to unfold, we too must be patient, knowing that God's promises are never delayed but always perfectly timed. As Jacob breathes his final words, his story doesn't end. It continues through his descendants, the 12 tribes, and the nation of Israel. His legacy, as retold in the Book of Jubilee, reminds us that God's plans transcend individual lives, weaving a story of redemption, purpose, and divine faithfulness across generations. The story of Joseph begins in the fertile fields of Canaan, where a young man dreams beneath the stars. His life unfolds as a tale of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate redemption, a journey that moves from the depths of despair to the heights of power in Egypt. In the Book of Jubilee, Joseph's story isn't just one of personal triumph. It's a profound exploration of divine providence and the power of forgiveness. Joseph's life takes an early turn when his father, Jacob, singles him out as the favored son. Clothed in a richly ornamented robe, Joseph becomes a symbol of love to his father, but a source of resentment to his brothers. Imagine the tension around the family table, the glances of envy and anger that grow each time Joseph recounts one of his dreams, visions of sheaves bowing before him or stars aligning in reverence. To his brothers, these dreams are insufferable claims of superiority. Their jealousy reaches a breaking point. One day, Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers in the fields. As Joseph approaches, they seize the opportunity. Imagine his confusion turning to fear as they strip him of his robe, throw him into a pit, and sell him to a caravan of Ishmaelite traders. Joseph, just 17, is carried off to Egypt, his cries fading into the distance as his brothers turn their backs on him. In the Book of Jubilee, this betrayal is not just a family conflict. It's a pivotal moment in God's plan. Joseph's descent into Egypt sets the stage for a greater narrative, one that will save not only his family but an entire nation. His suffering becomes the crucible through which he is refined, prepared for the role God has destined for him. In Egypt, Joseph's journey is marked by both hardship and divine favor. He rises to prominence in Potiphar's household through diligence and integrity, only to be falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into prison. Imagine Joseph in the dim, suffocating confines of a dungeon, his future seemingly erased. Yet even here, his faith remains unshaken. He gains the trust of his fellow prisoners and demonstrates a God-given gift, the ability to interpret dreams. It is this gift that transforms his life. When Pharaoh is troubled by unsettling dreams, visions of 7 fat cows devoured by 7 lean ones, and 7 healthy heads of grain consumed by 7 scorched ones, Joseph is summoned from prison. Standing before the ruler of Egypt, Joseph calmly declares, "God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do." His interpretation, foretelling 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine, elevates him to second in command, tasked with preparing Egypt for the coming crisis. Picture Joseph, now a man grown wise through adversity, traveling across the land, overseeing the storage of grain during the years of plenty. His rise to power is not a story of luck, but of divine providence, a testament to God's ability to turn betrayal into blessing. The famine eventually reaches Canaan, driving Joseph's brothers to Egypt in search of food. They stand before Joseph, unaware that the man before them is their long-lost brother. Imagine Joseph's inner turmoil as he recognizes them, the memories of their betrayal, the years of separation, and the hand of God in it all. Yet, instead of revealing himself, Joseph tests his brothers. Through a series of orchestrated events, including the planting of silver in their sacks and the demand for Benjamin's presence, Joseph observes their character and repentance. The moment of revelation is a powerful one. Unable to contain his emotions, Joseph sends everyone out of the room and declares, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers are stunned, their guilt and fear overwhelming. But Joseph, instead of seeking revenge, offers forgiveness. Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. In the Book of Jubilee, this act of forgiveness is monumental. Joseph's ability to rise above his pain and embrace God's greater plan is a lesson in redemption. His story teaches that forgiveness is not about condoning wrongs, but about aligning with God's purposes. By forgiving his brothers, Joseph restores not only his family, but also the fractured relationship between them and God's covenant. Joseph's life is a profound reminder of the power of resilience and trust in divine providence. Each step of his journey, from the pit to the palace, is orchestrated by God. What his brothers intended for harm, God used for good, not just for Joseph, but for countless others who would survive the famine because of his leadership. The themes of forgiveness and divine timing resonate deeply in Joseph's story. His ability to see God's hand in his suffering challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we holding on to bitterness where we could extend grace? Are we trusting in God's timing even when the path seems uncertain? As Joseph settles his family in Egypt and ensures their survival during the famine, his story becomes a beacon of hope. In the Book of Jubilee, Joseph's journey is not just a personal triumph, but a demonstration of God's faithfulness to his covenant. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, God's hand is at work, weaving a narrative of redemption, provision, and grace. Enoch. His name carries an air of mystery, a figure mentioned sparingly in the canonical Bible, but celebrated extensively in the Book of Jubilee. In the 7th generation from Adam, Enoch's life was unlike any other, so extraordinary that it was said, "He walked with God, and he was no more, because God took him." But the Book of Jubilee gives us much more. It paints a portrait of Enoch as a man of immense wisdom, a scribe of righteousness, and a keeper of sacred time. In the Book of Jubilee, Enoch is described as the first human to learn the art of writing. He didn't merely record human events, he documented divine truths. Imagine Enoch seated in quiet contemplation, carving the story of creation, the rhythms of jubilees, and the hidden mysteries of the heavens, onto clay tablets or parchment. His writings, preserved for future generations, became a bridge between God and humanity, a guide for living in harmony with divine law. But Enoch's role extended far beyond that of a scribe. He was a teacher, sharing his insights with his descendants, and revealing the intricacies of the sacred cycles. In the Book of Jubilee, these cycles, weeks of years, jubilees, and Sabbaths, are not just measures of time. They are the structure upon which God's covenant with humanity is built. Enoch's life becomes a model of how to align with this sacred rhythm, demonstrating obedience, trust, and devotion. The world Enoch lived in was one of growing corruption. Humanity, only a few generations removed from Eden, was already straying far from God's path. Violence and wickedness were rampant, threatening the harmony of creation. But amidst this chaos, Enoch stood as a beacon of righteousness. His walk with God wasn't just a metaphor, it was a testimony to a life lived in complete alignment with the Creator's will. In the Book of Jubilee, Enoch is also credited with receiving divine visions, including revelations about the Watchers, those fallen angels whose rebellion would bring about the flood. Enoch foresaw their judgment, the consequences of their actions, and the eventual restoration of creation. Imagine him as a prophet, bearing the weight of these cosmic truths, while remaining steadfast in his mission to guide humanity back to God. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Enoch's story is his departure from the earth. Unlike others who faced death, Enoch was taken directly into God's presence. The Book of Jubilee suggests this act was not just a reward for his faithfulness, but a demonstration of what it means to live fully in harmony with God. Enoch's life and ascension became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in a broken world, it is possible to walk so closely with God that the boundaries between heaven and earth begin to blur. What does Enoch's story mean for us today? First, it reminds us of the power of living intentionally. Enoch's life was marked by purpose, a dedication to understanding and preserving the divine order. In a world that often feels chaotic, his example challenges us to seek alignment with God's rhythm, to see time not as a burden but as a gift. Second, Enoch's role as a scribe and teacher highlights the importance of preserving wisdom for future generations. His writings weren't just for his time, they were for all time, a testimony to the enduring nature of God's truths. In our own lives, how are we passing down wisdom and faith to those who come after us? Finally, Enoch's ascension offers a glimpse of what it means to live in communion with God. While we may not be taken into heaven as he was, his story calls us to strive for that closeness, to walk with God in our daily lives, trusting in his plan and living in obedience to his will. Enoch's legacy, as preserved in the Book of Jubilee, is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, it is possible to live a life that reflects the light of the Creator. His story, both ancient and timeless, continues to inspire us to align with the sacred rhythm of God's time, to walk faithfully step by step in His presence. What makes the Book of Jubilee more than an ancient text? Why does its narrative of sacred time, divine covenants, and human redemption continue to resonate across centuries? To understand its enduring significance, we must bridge the gap between its lessons and the challenges of modern life. At its core, the Book of Jubilee offers a blueprint for individuals and societies to rediscover harmony, both with God and with one another. One of the book's most striking themes is its emphasis on time as sacred. In a world that prizes productivity and relentless busyness, this perspective is deeply countercultural. Imagine the Jubilee year, a time when debts are forgiven, slaves are freed, and land is returned to its rightful owners. This rhythm of renewal isn't merely an economic policy, it's a divine principle, reminding us that time is not a commodity to exploit, but a gift to honor. How often do we pause to rest and reflect? The Book of Jubilee challenges us to embrace the sacred cycles of time through Sabbaths, Jubilees, and moments of intentional stillness. These practices are not relics of the past. They are timeless antidotes to modern burnout. The concept of resting the land during sabbatical years, for instance, invites us to consider the importance of sustainability, not just for the earth, but for our own lives. What would happen if we trusted God enough to pause, letting go of control to align with His rhythm? The principles of the Jubilee year also speak to pressing societal issues. Imagine a world where crushing debts are periodically lifted, where resources are equitably distributed, and where justice and mercy outweigh profit and power. In our current age, where inequality often seems insurmountable, the Book of Jubilee challenges us to rethink our priorities. Its vision of restoration offers a compelling model for economic justice and reconciliation. At its heart, the Book of Jubilee is a story of relationships between God and humanity and among people. Its narratives of forgiveness, unity, and trust in divine timing resonate profoundly in our fractured world. Joseph's ability to forgive his brothers, for instance, serves as a powerful example. Forgiveness, as portrayed in the Book of Jubilee, is not about condoning wrongs, but about releasing the grip of bitterness to restore relationships. In a time marked by division and resentment, Joseph's story challenges us to extend grace. Imagine how much healing could take place in families, communities, and nations if forgiveness were embraced as an intentional act of grace. The theme of unity is also central to the Book of Jubilee. Just as the 12 tribes of Israel had unique roles but formed one nation under God, we are called to celebrate diversity while working toward collective purpose. In an age of polarization, this message is especially poignant. How can we honor our differences while striving for unity and shared goals? Finally, the Book of Jubilee offers profound insights into trusting God's timing. Stories like Abraham's long wait for a son or Joseph's years of hardship remind us that delays are not denials. In a culture of instant gratification, this lesson feels radical. Waiting, as the Book of Jubilee teaches, is an act of faith, an acknowledgement that God's plans often exceed our understanding. But what does this mean in practical terms? For individuals, it might mean embracing regular rest and reflection, creating space for spiritual renewal. For families, it could involve fostering forgiveness and unity, ensuring that relationships are nurtured. For societies, it might mean advocating for systems that prioritize justice, equity, and sustainability. In every context, the Book of Jubilee calls us to align with the Creator's rhythm, recognizing that true flourishing comes not from striving but from trust. The enduring relevance of the Book of Jubilee lies in its ability to connect the ancient and the modern, the personal and the collective. Its vision of sacred time, restored relationships, and divine purpose transcends historical boundaries, speaking directly to the heart of what it means to be human. As we reflect on its lessons, the question arises, how will we respond? Will we embrace the call to rest and renewal, or continue in the relentless pursuit of more? Will we choose forgiveness and unity, or cling to division and resentment? Will we trust in God's timing, or insist on controlling outcomes ourselves? The answers to these questions aren't theoretical. They're lived out in the choices we make each day. The Book of Jubilee isn't just a historical text. It's a living guide inviting us to step into a life of faith, justice, and restoration. Its rhythms are always calling us back to the Creator, reminding us that every moment, every cycle, is an opportunity to begin anew.